Chapter 11, The Gynandrous Great Mother. In truth, Western Christianity's stereotypes of weak femininity and strong masculinity are among the most extreme in history. Many of these sex role traits originated among the privileged classes, the only people who could afford passive, independent women, and for whom a bored and indulgent lifestyle made sex role playing an amusement. Bound feet among the wives of wealthy Chinese men of the past served the same aesthetic and entertainment function and were a sign of privilege. In the modern West, with its relative economic abundance, many strict sex role traits, once indigenous to the wealthy, have been passed on via the media to the masses. So we see the female office workers tottering to the job on spiky high-heeled shoes. Such shoes were often worn only by royalty, by courtiers and their ladies, and were originally devised to be worn by sacred priests to keep their manna from escaping into the ground. One thing democracy does is spread the silliness around. Unfortunately, with the many of the silliest sex roles, people tend to forget their origin and culture and class and believe they come directly from nature or from God. And so we see the silliest of customs enforced with humorless severity and sometimes the most punitive laws. Extremely sex-biased roles are the product of rigid heterosexuality, intellectual dualism, and the labor exploitive culture. They didn't exist in early societies. And many of the sex customs that did exist were just the reverse of ours. For example, among hunting and gathering people worldwide, the home is not only the property of the woman, but is built by her, and if it's portable, carried around on her back when she moves. Among traditional Chinese, the women wore pants, men wore skirts. Among people of the Kuvade customs, the women usually give birth with relative ease, while their husbands writhe and howl and grind their teeth. And among the still pagan 12th century Irish, to the horror of their chronicler Gildas Cambrensis, it was the females who pissed standing up while the males squatted. With sex roles and customs, it's very hard to make an absolute statement. Women always do this. Men exclusively do that, without having it immediately contradict by some culture, some place, some time. Indeed, the further back one goes in time, the more bisexual or gynandrous is the Great Mother. As Charlotte Wolfe says in Love Between Women, perhaps the present day lesbian woman is the closest in character to ancient women, with their fierce insistence on strengths, independence, and integrity of consciousness. The first love object for both women and men is the mother, but in patriarchy, the son has to reject the mother to be able to dominate the wife as a real man, and the daughter must betray her for the sake of submitting to a man. In matriarchal society, this double burden of biological and spiritual betrayal does not occur. For both women and men, there is a close identification with the collective group of mothers, with the Mother Earth, with the cosmic mother. And the psychoanalysts keep repeating this identification is conducive to bisexuality in both sexes. But homosexuality in tribal or pagan men was not based on rejection of the mother or the female, as is often true in patriarchal culture. Rather, it was based on brother love, brother affinity as sons of the mother. And lesbianism among women was not based on fear and rejection of men, but on the daughter's desire to reestablish union with the mother and with her own femaleness. The collective of mothers identified with both daughters and sons was made up of strong, creative, productive, and sexually free and visionary women. And so the ideal of womanliness for both sexes was not enforced, and mindless submissiveness of the oppressed, as it is in patriarchal culture. In many of the most ancient images of the goddess, she is shown with both breasts and phallus as hermaphroditic, i.e., bearded Ishtar. Divine bisexuality stressed her absolute power, especially over her own sexuality, which was a spiritual as well as emotional, physical expression. Male shamans in many primal cultures wore women's clothes, and lived like women, often in homosexual relationships. The Neolithic goddess was served in her temples by bisexual or lesbian priestesses and by bisexual or homosexual priests. In the disorder of the late Neolithic, in the transition from matriarchy to patriarchy, eunuch priests served her, men who had castrated themselves in an orgiastic identification with the goddess. One branch of the Essenes, the Semitic sect, with which Jesus was later associated in the Qumran on the Dead Sea, which served as eunuch priests in the temple of Artemis at Euphis on the west coast of Turkey. With what we know of this period, men were feeling under extreme pressure to identify either with the ancient great mother or with the militant new male gods, and devotion on both sides went to the extremes. Because such acts had become politicized with the rise of patriarchal misogyny, a fantasizing sex phobia new in the world. Creative women and men of all ages have found rigid heterosexuality in conflict with being fully alive and aware on all levels, sexual, psychic, and spiritual, because it is a mental and emotional limitation as well as a physical one. It is as if on all levels of our being, we are split in half, locked into one half and forbidden on the other. We are split against ourselves and against the self in the other by this moralistic opposition of natural polarities in the very real depths of our souls. And the result is war, necrophilia, alienation at the root. And if we don't resolve this, we will all die of a mutual murder that is total suicide. As Esther Harding says in Women's Mysteries, Ancient and Modern, modern women at the core of their being is cut off from the source of life. With rigidly imposed heterosexual roles, women and men also are emotionally and mentally stunted. Women are also physically stunted. Compare us with statues and reliefs of the Amazon or the huge Celtic warrior women. In ancient Scotland, land of the Picts, who were later invaded by Celts from Northern Ireland, some very mysterious legendary warrior women lived. They were Amazonian battle fighters and witch shamans, a lesbian bisexual sisterhood entrusted with the guardianship of their tribe's secret powers and visions. According to Jean Markele and Women of the Celts, all the great Celtic warrior heroes were initiated into the profession of arms and also into the sacred mysteries of sex by these women. The Picts were the naked shock troops of all of the Celtic nations. They went into battle, women and men side by side, wearing only their blue body paint, woad, sacred to the Earth Mother. They were called Picts, Indo-European peg, tattooed, gaudily keeked, in Latin pictus, painted, as they decorated their entire bodies with these blue tattoos of all the magic birds, beasts, and fish belonging to the Great Mother. They practiced communal sex rites and sometimes ritual cannibalism. The Celtic women generally were known for their great physical strength and ferocious beauty in battle. Roman historians wrote that among the Gauls, the women were almost as tall as the men and equal in courage. The Teutonic as well as Celtic tribes were often led into battle by the warrior queens, and the invading Roman soldiers reportedly feared fighting women more than their male companions. As Briffault noted again and again, among primitive people not yet contaminated by the physical habits and role-playing of civilization, it was common to find the women equal in stature, often larger than the men, with great musculature and endurance capacities. Among Stone Age skeletons of Neanderthals, it's often impossible to determine sex by size and weight of bones. Early females and males were almost equal in stature and equally strong. As seen in the most ancient Paleolithic images of the goddess, the solid strength and massiveness of the female body was an ideal. And certainly the human race and earlier hominids couldn't have survived 2 to 3 million years of catastrophic earth changes if females had been as physically weak and mentally dependent during those long, hard ages as we are supposed to be today. Anne Cameron's Daughters of the Copper Woman, stories of Northwest Pacific Indian women at Vancouver Island, gives us a real picture of the strengths needed by early women. To be fit as mothers, as lovers, food and shelter producers, as wise women, as visionaries, as creators, and guardians of a whole people's culture, these females began undergoing rigorous physical training programs long before puberty to develop every strength of mind, of heart, of leg, arm muscle, and spirit needed to be grown women, i.e., fully evolved human beings. And so the young women of the ancient matriarchal Sparta also developed skilled and athletic bodies. When they married, the wedding ceremony included a wrestling match with their new mate. In civilized patriarchal society, on the other hand, a physically undeveloped, lobotomized, and desexualized woman can live what is called a normal life. Here are the memorable thoughts of the psychosurgeons. Lobotomized women make good housekeepers. It is more socially acceptable to lobotomize women than men because creativity, which the operation totally destroys is, in this society, an expendable nullity in women. There is no such thing as partial liberation. No one can be economically free while sexually repressed and bifurcated. No one can be sexually liberated while an economic slave. No one can enjoy mental freedoms while the body's labor and sexuality are exploited and conditioned by oppression. And if we pretend that we can free our spirits while the bodies, minds, and emotions of humanity are still straitened by the biphobic and exploitative sexual, social, and economic ideologies, we delude ourselves. Freedom is all or nothing. And there is no freedom for males of any class or color or ethnic group while the female remains unfree. Ancient bisexual woman was inventor, scientist, builder, artist, healer, producer of craft and culture, shaman, ecstatic visionary, warrior, and leader. This is our total potential when our life energies are not divided against themselves and against us, blocked and distorted by cultural and religious stereotypes. This is just the beginning of our potential, when our energies are able to flow out freely and create the world, as symbolized by the self-sustaining power of the Gynandrous Great Mother.